All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me.
Well, hi, I was just making a note to myself. Welcome to the live stream of the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. I got my old radio in here. This is the radio, and I used to have a bunch of stuff in my garage where I had my studio when the last time. And what was funny was during the time of COVID, I had all, years and years worth of political memorabilia against my back. And among the things was this wonderful like 1930s era radio. And it's an old Victrola. So it's really cool. And I love it. My dad gave it to me. So what can I tell you? I mean, it's my heirloom from my dad. How's that? I would say it's a family heirloom, but he just acquired it. It was not our family's. And so they decided at the Room Raiders, remember those guys? I'd love to look them up because I had one of the worst ratings ever for a COVID era backdrop for my live streams and my live, stuff that I interviews and things like that I did on television, which I did quite a bit of. And, it was just like, oh, okay. Thanks a lot, guys. And then I went on, I found out somebody says, your room is terrible. And I went back and I looked and I pointed out all of the things in my background, from my Hillary Clinton nutcracker to Ronald Reagan dolls. I had a Trump doll that, said his little sayings before he became the president or even got interested necessarily in international and national politics. Anyway, it was pretty funny. And then that's when I got feedback. Oh, that thing is pretty cool. That room she's got isn't as bad as you think it is, Room Raiders. So whatever. So I'm glad to have it in here. My dad gave it to me, and my husband and I put it in here yesterday. So that's pretty nifty. Pretty cool. Well, we've lots going on. Do you realize that Donald Trump is the worst fascist in the world? I mean, it's not enough that he hasn't done any fascist stuff. But now Jimmy Kimmel has gone off and gotten back on the air. Of course, Nexstar and Sinclair networks won't be carrying him because they still take issue with the fact that he's hasn't apologized for lying on the air about the person in charge of killing Charlie Kirk, but at least the top person of interest, the suspect. And but Trump, I thought he was the fascist. I thought the FCC was going to keep him off the air. I thought the intemperate mentions by the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, were dumb, especially at a time like that. Like, dude, when they're self-destructing, get out of the way, which is exactly what was going on. So anyway, like I say, he's terrible fascist. And I can prove it to you because I can tell you he's a fascist because he's letting Jimmy Kimmel back on the air. He's letting Jimmy Kimmel back on the air. And what fascist would allow that to happen, right? Why in heaven's name would he allow that to happen? Here's all the people who called him a fascist, all these different news outfits and these guys. And I did this on using Perplexity AI today. God, they do a terrible job of rendering any images. So I thought I'd show you this and, all the misspellings. You can always tell. And for whatever reason, whenever they err on the side of this Cyrillic alphabet. Have you ever noticed that? Here's another one that was the better method. They did not, over at Perplexity, want to put an image or anything close to the image of Jimmy Kimmel on my picture, my image that they were rendering for me. But Grok will do that. That's one of the things I love about Grok. That's the Elon Musk one. Fascism accusations against Trump. And we've got every conceivable kind of allegation against Donald Trump. And you know what the fact of the matter is, he's a terrible, terrible fascist. Because if he were, Jimmy Kimmel still wouldn't be on. I mean, if he did what all these people, all these Rolling Stone, Newsweek, we've got the Daily Beast. Well, of course, the Daily Beast is going to say stuff like that. Fox News even reported on all the places that were calling him a fascist as a result of Brendan Carr's intemperate and ill-advised commentary on we can do it the easy way or the hard way for Jimmy Kimmel. And so all of these things existed, and so he's terrible. So Jimmy Kimmel's coming back. And Sinclair, as I mentioned, Sinclair and a Nexstar, which is trying to get FCC approval for a merger with another company so that they can have more. Well, they're not gonna air Jimmy Kimmel again. That's it, because the ratings suck. Okay, let's be honest, the ratings suck. President Trump was not wrong when he said that the reason Jimmy Kimmel got suspended from his job for his intemperate remarks, not only but stupid and inaccurate. And then he continued to pile on. In the world, said it was worse that Jimmy Kimmel had been taken off the air than for Charlie Kirk to be taken off the planet. It was just getting that ridiculous. So now here we have it. ABC has reinstituted his program. His contract is up in January, I understand. So I think he's going to be out anyway, because that particular kind of show at that particular time is what Jon Stewart, who used to be in that time zone, called, I think the quote was, it was like a, let's see, how did he put it? I want to make sure I get it right. A blockbuster inside, another antiquated, gone by the wayside corporation and business model. And so it is for this. And even I think Sinclair is putting Celebrity Family Feud on in the place of Jimmy Kimmel. And how much do you want to bet that will outdraw Jimmy Kimmel's program on some of those stations? And so basically half the country is not going to Jimmy Kimmel. Well, but that's not Trump's doing. That's a business decision on the part of the Nexstar and Works. So there you have it. So Jimmy Kimmel back on the air as of the live stream time, and it'll be tonight because I'm doing this on Tuesday, when you should be watching the crazy stuff that goes on in the program before Alex gets his hands on the post-production aspect of this. And, we've had some real whoppers. So anyway, that's what's happening. And I have to say, once again, Donald Trump, worst fascist ever. Some breaking news that you'll get more of a little bit later. Ryan Ruth, the person who was the second individual to attempt to assassinate Donald Trump, as long as we're talking about assassinations, he tried himself in court today to take himself out after being found guilty of attempting to assassinate the president. Yep. So it didn't work, though. I'd like to know how. Man who attempted to assassinate Donald Trump at the Florida golf course last year tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen. Yeah, this is a very interesting individual. And he also is dumb enough to attempt to try to take out the president at the push of some pretty terrible actors. So I wait to find out, to see if this is going to happen on any other case we might have had recently. Another assassination case. Anyway, he tried to take himself out. So what happened was, let's see, they swarmed him, dragged him out of the courthouse. So he tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen. Shortly after being found guilty, 5 men, 7 woman jury found Ryan Ruth guilty on all counts. They only had 2 hours of deliberation. Okay. After the jurors were on their way out of the courtroom, Ruth grabbed a pen and started trying to stab himself in the neck. And we all know how effective those neck wounds can be. We do have some conspiracy theories, if you will, about Charlie Kirk's assassination, following, of course, this incredibly moving memorial service over the weekend. It's been saturation coverage. I'm not going to belabor anything. Somebody did mention on X, they wondered out loud, why are there fireworks at a memorial service? Well, the answer is that's what Charlie would have wanted. The whole thing is exactly the way Charlie Kirk wanted to have a stadium event. And it's what Turning Point does a lot. And so they gave him the old fireworks. So that's to answer your question. But there is a lot of information about, could that 30-aught shell have gone into his neck, instantly killing him, as we found out from his folks. But in addition to that, how come there was no exit wound? So there are a lot of things. I know it's called the magic bullet. And his friend said, and Turning Point number 2, said that he talked to the emergency doctor and said that Charlie's bones were very, very thick, that even though it could have brought down a bull moose, it was miraculous that it just stopped in his body, to leading some folks to say, hey, wait, was he wearing body armor? It didn't look like it. He was wearing a T-shirt. Pretty easy to tell if he was wearing any, but we don't know for sure. A lot of, we don't know. And in addition to that, we've got questions. And so we'll take those up on Thursday. It's messy. What can I tell you? It's messy. Donald Trump yesterday, I'll just do today's news on Donald Trump. Here he is, Donald Trump, going to the United Nations after apparently he got into the tanning booth or spray tan booth. And he actually looked really good today. And Melania was wearing like 7-inch heels. And they went to the United Nations. And here they are. Let's see. They're going on the escalator. Watch this. And it stopped. The second, watch this, I'm going to pull it back. The second Donald Trump set foot on that, he's going. Now watch him as he puts one foot on the escalator that has been working all day. Watch this. We have some latency issues going on now. I don't know why. And it stopped. So Melania's going, well, we're not going to be those people on that joke. Help us. Walk up. So she walks up and they go. And so anyway, that was kind of interesting. And then if that was, okay, what's the United Nations doing? Come on, man. They also stopped his teleprompter. We just had a little incident with the teleprompter. So after the escalator was turned off for him, at the very moment, he put one foot on the escalator. Then we had this.
And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter.
That's why you go up with another.
The teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you, nevertheless.
They hate him.
And that way you speak more from the heart. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble.
So he makes a joke of it, and that's the way it ends. Kind of funny. And there's the escalator again. Watch it. One more. Come on, Donald, get going. Did I stop it somehow? It's just the latency I'm experiencing. And it stops. So, so anyway, he gave the United Nations body what for, actually. He had lots to say to him. Let's hear what he has to say.
Appreciate it.
Oh, this is the teleprompter one. I beg your pardon.
The administration also lost nearly 300,000 children. Think of that. They lost more than 300,000 children, little children.
And I'm stopping just for a moment. He's talking about all the missing kids that we've told are as many as 600,000, but now he's back to 300,000. Okay, somebody please do the math. And then the other thing is that this is in addition to him saying, you cannot kill your countries by unfettered immigration. You are going to lose the soul of your country. He's telling the rest of the nations, sure, invite people in. You can't have illegal immigration. This doesn't make any sense. So he's tying the missing children into that issue. It's an excellent point. Let's listen.
Children who were trafficked into the United States on the Biden watch, many of whom have been raped, exploited, and abused, and sold. Sold. Nobody talks about that. The fake news doesn't write about it. With many others, young children who are missing or dead. And we found a lot of these children, and we're sending them back, and we've been sending them back to their parents. They said, nobody knows who they are. They said, where do you come from? And they'll give us a country, and we'll find out, and we'll figure it out, and we'll bring them back to their homes. And the mother and father rush to the door, and their tears in their eyes. They can't believe that they're seeing their son or daughter, their little son or daughter again. We've done almost 30,000 of them so far.
They've removed them, and they've sent them back to their home. Of course, there was that one judge who decided that they shouldn't go back to their parents in Guatemala. And that was a real, they're going to go back home, for God's sake. Stupid.
The executive director of the United Nations Environmental Program predicted that by the year 2000, climate change would cause a global catastrophe. He said that
he goes after them on climate change, and he talks about the history of being lied to by none other than the United Nations.
Will be irreversible, as any nuclear holocaust would be. This is what they said at the United Nations. What happened? Here we are. Another UN official stated in 1989 that within a decade, entire nations could be wiped off the map by global warming. Not happening. You know, it used to be global cooling. If you look back years ago in the 1920s and the 1930s, they said, global cooling will kill the world. We have to do something. Then they said global warming will kill the world. But then it started getting cooler. So now they could just call it climate change, because that way they can't miss. It's climate change. Because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, there's climate change. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. Climate change, no matter what happens, you're involved in that. No more global warming, no more global cooling. All of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong. They were made by stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes and given those same countries no chance for success.
Okay, so he goes on, his escalator stops, teleprompter ceases to work. He then he has a speech in front of him, as one must, and then he starts speaking off the cuff also. He likes to do that. Sometimes it elongates his speeches by twofold, but there you are. Okay, so then he did that. Fine, great. Yesterday, a lot of people took him to task. Why? Because before we get ahead of our guest, who's here and waiting, just so hang on a second, he went and announced with the head of HHS, FDA, Medicare and Medicaid services, chiefs, all established medical professionals, that, you know what? We just want you to have a heads up, moms, parents. We want you to have a heads up And this is what we're going to do. We want to make a drug available to you, and you're an autistic child who already pre-exists, and we want you to be notified that in utero, you need to reduce. President Trump said, stop, but, it's his opinion. He's very emotional about this issue as people he knows who have autistic children. And so he said in utero, and they recommended don't take Tylenol if you don't have to. The acetaminophen and the Tylenol is proven there's causation there with autism. Okay, so that's what they reported. And that is some interesting information. Here's Dr. Martin McCary.
The FDA is filing a Federal Register notice.
How are you, Marty?
News. Today, the FDA is filing a Federal Register notice to change the label on an exciting treatment called prescription Leucovorin so that it can be available to children with autism. Autism may also be due to an autoimmune reaction to a folate receptor on the brain, not allowing that important vitamin to get into the brain cells. It's a fairly established, mature pathway. Again, we have a duty to let doctors and the public know we are going to change the label to make it available. Hundreds of thousands of kids, in my opinion, will benefit. One study found that with kids with autism and chronic folate deficiency, 2/3 of kids with autism symptoms had improvement, and some marked improvement. Mr. President, you told us to do what's medically right, to go bold, and not worry about the corporations and the lobbyists. So that's what we're here doing today.
Okay, so that's what they did yesterday. They made the announcement they would prefer, that they just by all means get to the point where people just can regulate it themselves. They don't necessarily want to prescribe what you need to do. Although if there are any more studies that prove the causation, even the Harvard University Medical School dean says that there is causation. But nevertheless, if that does continue and we have further information about it, they suggest that you take a look at it and act accordingly. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Wouldn't you rather know than not know? Didn't COVID teach us something? Wouldn't you rather know? How about just say, if you feel better, you might want to wear a mask. Or if you feel better, we've got this therapeutic. It's called a vaccine. It's not really a vaccine. Speaking of vaccine, the woman who wrote the book on vaccines is Shaz Khan. And she's written this book, which is just amazing. The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline, a fact-packed history of vaccines and their makers. And here's a look at her book. It's just come back, out not too awfully long ago. And Shaz Khan, welcome to the Adult in the Room podcast. And I apologize, we've had a few technical issues today, so I apologize getting to you late. So appreciate you doing that. And what did you think about the autism announcement yesterday, by the way?
Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for having me. Well, yeah, yesterday's announcement by President Trump was quite interesting. It was definitely unexpected. But to be honest, this issue of paracetamol, and we say here in Europe, has been linked to complications, especially if it's been taken in pregnancy for a while now. So it's finally coming out, which is really quite reassuring. Obviously, it's not a ban of the product because it still is the only, as I understood, Tylenol is the only medication to reduce the fever, which is actually really recommended for pregnant women because it's considered safe. But that said, there's still, as Senator Johnson brought up in the Senate hearings, there's over 700 deaths reported per year linked to acetaminophen. Sorry, I also have.
you are in. See, are you in Switzerland or now or? Okay, what a terrible place to be. Such a beautiful country.
Yeah, so we're all a bit of a snake pit, though.
Is it? Oh, is it? Now tell me about. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say.
I got to hear about the snake pit.
World Health Organization, we have the World Economic Forum, we have Gavi, we have the Global Fund, we have the International Bank of Settlements. We have quite a few institutions here and a high number of NGOs, which are often, I just think they're front groups for the corporations. But yeah, Switzerland's a beautiful country. I absolutely love it here, I must say.
Yeah, the country's fine. Plus, it's one-stop shopping if you want to be able to confront people where they are. And, in terms of the NGOs and the World Economic Forum, WEF, and all those places, things, people, they're around. So they're easy to get to. It's like living in Washington, D.C. They're all there. They're all there. You wrote this book, The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline. And this is not a book. This is put out by Children's Health Defense. It's not a book about your opinions or anything. It's actually literally a timeline, right?
It is a chronological compilation of over 1,300 facts relating to vaccination in the US, in the UK, Switzerland, Australia, and some in Asia and Africa. Basically, because I thought, there are lots of books on vaccinations, and there are a couple that go into the history. I always talk about Dissolving Illusions. If anybody hasn't already read that and are interested, it is an excellent book by Dr. Suzanne Humphreys and Roman Bystrionic. They also have a website that goes with it, dissolvingillusions.com. But there was nothing like, there was an in-depth timeline which showed as well all the vaccines that we had available in the early 20th century. I've reproduced some of the catalogs already that existed back then. Some of the old advertising that was obviously done in medical journals at the time vaccines weren't advertised to the public until the 70s in the US.
Yeah.
So it was I never intended to write this book. I went down the rabbit hole just for personal interest and because of a tragic story from myself. But as I got along into the research, and by 2018, because I was going into the libraries and the National Archives, when I came across government documents which acknowledged neurological injury following vaccination, and the way that they intentionally dissimulated it from the public just angered me, to be quite honest. So in that point, I said, okay, I have to put this in a documented form so that people can check it, keep it as neutral as possible. It's just a list of facts and dates, and obviously there are a lot of visuals as well. There's some infographics, and there's also a timeline on the pharmaceutical industry mergers and acquisitions, because I also found that quite hard to track, because now we've got a lot of pharmaceutical companies which are consolidated. We know about the big four vaccine manufacturers, but obviously they've bought up the portfolios of other smaller companies. So I wanted to track that as well. So this way it's in a documented form.
Now, I want to get into your backstory about that, why you were brought to write, what prompted you to write the book. But I did want to find out, because this autism announcement was made on Monday, that what in your experience, you're not a doctor, you're a layperson, but you have done more to lay out the history of these vaccines than I think any other person has ever done. If I'm not mistaken, you've got the timeline right there. And so you've done a historical job to report on this. But now that I've said that, do you see that there might be, based on your research, how would we deal with autism, and what do you know about the research out there that would speak to that?
So as we know, autism has increased exponentially since the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. It is a multifactorial disease, neurological basically by default, but there is no blood test to check if you have autism. It's obviously it's in a DSM, so was a diagnostic statistic manual for mental diseases, so to speak. What I have seen definitely in the research for over 100 years is that vaccines have been consistently, and all of them, have been linked to neurological complications. Now, autism is a type of neurological complication, if you will, or disorder. Obviously, there's a wide spectrum from people who are autistic and who function quite well to the autistic kid who obviously is never going to be able to be independent, who's banging their head against the wall, has all kinds of other health issues as well, and will never be able to really participate in society. And it's basically a grown-up kid. And obviously, those are the cases which destroy the families. They're incredibly challenging. They're incredibly expensive, because as well, those who try to treat them will go from all different angles, from nutritional supplements to psychotherapy. So psychotherapy to a certain extent for those where it's possible. But in my research, what definitely came out is encephalopathy, which is a type of brain damage, which has been consistently linked to vaccines. And I could say that autism is kind of a synonym for that to a certain extent. And I don't know if you remember the case of Hannah Pauling, who was actually compensated by the US government under the Vaccine Compensation Injury Act. Was compensated. It's lucky enough her father was a neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins, and they won, but they used the term closer to encephalopathy. And that is often the term that parents are advised to use if they are going to the vaccine injury compensation program to get compensation, to use that word and not to use autism, because that's the big taboo. It's the big letter, it's the big label that they don't want to associate to vaccines. And it's very hard to prove causation, of course. But it's definitely something that's consistently come up since the time of the smallpox vaccine, is neurological complications. Now, we call it today autism, but back in the days, we called it other things, or we didn't label it at all, and we just threw them in insane asylums, or we hid them away. And this was the case world over. It wasn't just in the Western countries. So there's definitely a pattern of neurological disturbances caused by vaccine. And the major one was the DTP shot, so the diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, which before the 90s was a whole cell variant, which was known to be very reactogenic. And it's interesting to note that pertussis was only available alone as a vaccine in the beginning of the 20th century, and then was very quickly in the 1940s combined with DT. So you can't get it on its own if that's just the vaccine that you want. And for instance, they vaccinate pregnant women with DTP just for the pertussis component, but it still only exists as a 3-in-1 product. And I was just trying to say that they knew it was very reactogenic since its inception. And it's been causing problems. And even the acellular pertussis, which is supposed to be less reactogenic, still, the Institute of Medicine, when they did a report in 2012, I believe, is they could not find sufficient science to support or to refute the link between the DTaP and autism. So it still merits a lot of investigation for sure.
Interesting. I've heard you say before that you don't think there's really did I hear you properly, that you don't think there's really a problem with the D and the DTaP and DTaP?
I think, to be quite honest, there are problems with all of them, but all vaccines are different, as are all people different. We all react differently to the same products. The diphtheria and tetanus component of that DTP shot are both toxoids, and they're probably one of the oldest toxoids that we use. They still in themselves could be reactogenic. And back in the days, a DTP shot, just remind you, did have thimerosal and mercury. Now it doesn't have, thimerosal, which is a form of mercury, and aluminum. And today it's just got aluminum and another type of preservative. But there are problems with all vaccines. So the question is, are they really protective? And the toxoid by nature cannot actually prevent you from getting the disease, but is supposed to attenuate the symptoms of the disease.
Right. And are there any more live vaccines out there at all, or are they all killed?
The measles, live attenuated. There's no live. There's live attenuated, which is obviously the measles, mumps, rubella, and the varicella vaccine. The other live ones. There are no other live.
I'm just curious about that. Yellow fever.
Yeah. But they've kind of shifted from live attenuated. Sorry.
So I've got this patchy past with vaccines, and it's very difficult to talk about vaccines. On YouTube, for example, we may get censored as a result. Although I've seen you on YouTube, so apparently not everybody's getting censored, but it certainly does look like that some of those sites are getting throttled. YouTube came out today and had sent Representative Jim Jordan of the Oversight and Judiciary Committees a letter saying that they would no longer censor material about anything that the government wants them to do. And I suppose there are situational differences that they can draw on at a later point, but they're assuring him that that's not going to be happening, and that people who have been previously censored for their COVID comments and that sort of thing are going to be restored. They'll just have to ask. So I say that with just to say to our viewers and listeners that this is a very problematic kind of a discussion to have, and you sort of kill yourself, but when you talk about such things on the air, on YouTube, never on Rumble. That's why we do our live show on Rumble. But let me ask you now. As I said, I have a background with vaccines as a parent, only as a parent, and my daughter, our second daughter, died of varicella. She died of chickenpox, and so I was just really freaked out, in a way, because I thought, well, what the heck? I mean, how come we don't have a chickenpox vaccine, right? How come we don't have that? Not many kids die of varicella, or I'm sure that they were hiding a lot. I called Johns Hopkins and they said, oh, nobody reports all of the chickenpox deaths. And the reason is because they're always attributed to something else. I mean, they have the exact wrong thing on my daughter's death certificate. So the reason I say that is because I made sure that my third daughter was given the varicella vaccine. She was one of the first kids in town to get that when it finally came out. So this happened in the 1990s. So I have mixed feelings about this. And as my kids have kids, my feelings about this have changed over to, yes, real vaccines are helpful, I suppose, but not everyone, not all of them, not things that they don't have to confront for years and years. I'm talking about the ones for sexually transmitted diseases. That's the dumbest thing ever. But also, I would say, and if the mom has a sexually transmitted disease, they know that in the hospital, for crying out loud. So that said, now that we have this discussion about autism, which has been an ongoing thing for how many years has this been a thing? 20 years, 30 years, in terms of people going, wait a second now, hold on, there's some problem here. And so I do worry about that. I do worry about, being in a family and seeing my little babies now, the little ones now, just, I hate them to be a human pincushion, to use an antiquated phrase. That's all. Just to react. I just want to hear what you think.
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear that your daughter passed away from varicella. I mean, my curiosity would be like, well, what else was going on? Was there anything else on? Because it's true, I've never heard of anybody else dying.
No, they do. Well, you get chickenpox inside. So you get it inside your body, and if it attacks for example, if it attacks your brain, you get encephalitis. If it attacks your heart, you get heart disease, or, it's inflamed. And I'm blanking at the moment on exactly what that was called. And, it'll hit me in a minute. But she got, it infected her heart, stopped her heart. She would have been.
How old she was when it happened?
She was 2.
2, wow, okay.
Mm-hmm. Didn't have a particularly big case of it either. And my daughter and both my daughters got, somebody sent their kids over to our house and they got exposed at the same time. And we weren't having a chickenpox party. No. But that's what happens. And so one reacted one way, one reacted another. Thank goodness my oldest was still among the living. But anyway, but yeah, so you get them inside, and if it infects any of your organs, you could be in big trouble. So they thought for a while when we were at the ER that she might be able to get up to Loma Linda Medical Center, because that's where they were doing all the transplants, the heart transplants at the time. And so, but they couldn't revive her. They couldn't do anything to get her heart pumping again, just to keep her going until they could get her there by life flight. And so that did not happen. And they had to call her.
Yeah. Sincere condolences. But I mean, as you said, we cannot treat all the vaccines the same, and everybody is different. We all have different, already genetic constitutions, lifestyles, all kinds of things. But it's important, I think, that we don't batch all the vaccines together. And this is what is happening at the moment. It's like if you question any vaccine, you're considered an anti-vaxxer.
Right.
If you're just like, I don't want I'd like to get the tetanus, but I don't really want to have the diphtheria and the pertussis. And nowadays, 6 in 1, like if you end up in hospital and you just want the tetanus shot, you don't even have that option. So that is also a problem, which is, basically an industry issue, because the industry is imposing what they want on a market value, what's interesting market-wise. It's not the government saying, hey, listen, we need to have tetanus shots for individuals so we can give that option to people, because people will refuse if there isn't that option of having a solo tetanus. So let's make sure we keep it available. There's none of that. Even here in Switzerland, they took the single tetanus shot off the market in 2018 for no good reason other than there wasn't enough demand, apparently. But,
we still have solo shots here, because I've gotten in the last 10 years, I've gotten a tetanus shot. And it was just a tetanus shot, if I recall. Oh, what's that?
Are you sure it wasn't mixed with diphtheria?
I don't. I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I can't swear on my Bible that it was, but it would be weird if it were for an adult. Don't you think that's weird? But I could
That's how it
check.
is now. That's how it is. You can't get it separated, individual, so we speak. So I'd be very surprised in the last 10 years, thinking we're 2025, you would have received really a solo tetanus. It would have been mixed with something else, and you just might not have been informed, because that's the other thing. So the amount of people I ask, well, okay, you got a vaccine, what was it? What was in it? They don't know. They don't ask. It's crazy that people will let themselves be injected with something and not even ask a single question, especially those people who are so concerned about what they eat or the products that they use. They want to use organic cotton, but when it comes to injections, they don't ask any questions. And you have to ask the questions. You have to find out about the ingredients, in my opinion, and also look out for injuries, because the other big problem is medical professionals are not trained to look out for medical injuries following vaccines. Hence, they deny them very quickly, and we have a complete underreporting of those injuries.
Right.
So we can't actually address, well, what are the biological mechanisms for it? I was saying earlier that neurological injury following vaccines has been well recognized for over a century. I haven't seen a single study by the government or by industry that looks into understanding the biological mechanisms of how and why a vaccine can create neurological injury. So that's just very strange.
Don't you think they'd want to know that? And to what do they attribute that? Obviously they're not looking, but what's that?
They will say it's very rare, it could be because of the aluminum, but it's happened even after vaccines that don't have aluminum. So this just like putting it under the table and not really addressing it, is saying it's just rare, as if it doesn't mean anything because it's rare. But even if you're, 1 out of a million, which rare does not mean that. Rare means less than 1 in 1,000 or up to 1 in 10,000. I mean, especially after this COVID injection, like we've seen the amount of injuries, and they're just all being systematically denied.
Yeah, that is frightening. Yeah, I mean, I did the entire medical cadre, just closed ranks and marched toward whoever, toward their patients, and said, whatever you tell me that is anything other than that which the FDA and the pharma companies tell me, I will not listen to. I mean, for example, my husband got one of the Pfizer shots, and he had a fairly closely related heart issue, and he was hiking, and all of a sudden he had to sit down, and it was bad. He had to go to a heart specialist. And the heart specialist, you know what he told him? COVID doesn't have anything to do with that. The COVID vaccine doesn't have anything to do with that. I thought, really? Everything I'm reading right now, at this moment, says it has something to do with it. They still deny it. And that guy eventually went out of business. I mean, that particular heart doctor, he retired. But I was, I was citing sources, and I'm like, are you sure about this? Are you? Oh, no. And I thought, I have a list of doctors I want to fire, because if you're not keeping up on the literature, then what good are you to me, right? I mean, I went in and asked my doctor, I said, I'd like to be put on a series of ivermectin because I know it'll forestall infection. If I do get an infection, be it COVID or anything else, it will help. And she laughed at me. And I thought, oh, I guess I'm not going to come here anymore. I had to go outside and get it. I had to get it on an online pharmacy. Anyway, so I apologize. So
no, we had the same situation here in Switzerland. I mean, it was never officially illegal or banned, but they interfered with a prescription from the pharmacists. So the pharmacist could block a prescription by a doctor, and then they sent out a rather menacing letter to all the doctors from the medical board saying that we do not recommend hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin. It has not been clinically proven to have any efficacy on SARS-CoV-2, which is just ridiculous. It's like now medicine
Isn't that the dumbest thing?
Yeah, it is. But one of the big concerns with the medical system in general is now science is no longer based on just, observation and measurements, etc., and experience of a doctor who's working in a clinical practice with individuals and see what works. It has to be funded by the pharmaceutical industry to the tune of millions of dollars and go through the phase 3 clinical trials and get an FDA drug approval, which, by the way, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were already FDA approved, just not
Exactly.
for COVID. So it's reserving any kind of treatment options to the pharmaceutical industry, again, who were not interested in those two drugs, I would say, because they weren't expensive. They weren't able to make a huge profit out of them. And if they've been treating COVID with those two drugs or anything else, vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D, they wouldn't have been able to bring out the vaccines, so-called vaccines, on an emergency authorization use.
Right. That's exactly right. That's right. And so that was the whole ball game right there. And then they lied about that. That's why they did that. We knew that's why they were doing that. With this using a drug that is already used to treat the effects of chemotherapy, this one, Leucovorin, I think is the way you pronounce it. And this would be given to people with autism right now. And they're going to change the label and say it can be used. And they're going to do that because in order to use this drug for autism, and for Medicaid and Medicare to pay for it, they have to change the labeling, and the FDA has to give its imprimatur. And so it is. But you wouldn't think that was that big of a deal. It was advised. This is the big announcement made on Monday. It was advised that people use this, take this. If you believe that this could help your child, then by all means, there's no harm in trying. And the Time magazine said that leucovorin is a form of folic acid, which is a synthetic form of folate, vitamin B9. In some cases, people with lower brain folate levels may have antibodies, and they are reusing this drug and making it sound as if they used words about exciting treatment is a decades-old medicine that treats toxic effects of chemotherapy, thus sort of putting down the reuse or repurposing of this drug for autism, which I found to be can we just stop dissing the drugs, which may be used for other things? I mean, that's how we got the little blue pill, right? And so, they were using it for one thing. It happened to be helpful in another area, and they decided that they were going to do something. Instead of going off-brand with it, they were going to use it for some other purpose, and that's what they're doing here. Time magazine denigrating that, which I find... It will probably not surprise you that that's what they're doing. The media are doing that.
I'm not really surprised. I mean, it's interesting because there is no alleged cure for autism. There's no real treatment that is proposed by allopathic medicine. So they should be happy that there's anything that may improve symptoms and may help autistic kids. And as if the statistics are true, and you're talking about 1 in 31 children being affected in the USA, up to 1 in 12 boys, this is absolutely catastrophic. We don't have statistics in Switzerland exactly, so I couldn't even tell you what the rates are in Switzerland. I mean, the last time I asked was like 1 in 100, but they mixed in children with adults, so you're not quite sure exactly what the number is. But just recently here in Switzerland, they started to say, well, they have to look at the causes of autism because it's asking too much money from the social system now. We have too many children who are under what they call the invalidity insurance, so social benefits, basically, because they can't make money themselves. And it's costing too much. So that's now suddenly the impetus for looking. But in general, there's no real cure. There's lots of people that I've read about and whose witness testimonies I've listened to who have autistic children who regressed. I'm not talking about the autistic from birth. I'm talking about where they were developing normally and then something happened, I got a shot, whatever, and they started regressing. And they've had a lot of success over the long term with looking at addressing issues like diet, because a lot of these kids have gastrointestinal issues, precisely folate levels, looking at glutathione levels, trying to bring those back up, which is what also acetaminophen actually brings down. It could also be one of the reasons why it's been now not recommended for pregnant women. So they should be happy that there's something, because it's costing so much money to look after these autistic kids. And I'm talking about obviously the extreme ones who aren't independent, who can't look after themselves, not the functioning ones. But it's just strange that they don't want to. Cause this, on top of it, from what I understood, this drug, which is made by GSK, isn't even really expensive. So maybe that's why they're denigrating it, because they can't make too much profit off it. It's just really quite sad.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's what they did with their COVID. Didn't they have a COVID vaccine also? GlaxoSmithKline, didn't they also have one of?
I think they were working on it, but they abandoned it.
Oh, that's right. They were late to the party, so they couldn't get on the gravy train.
Mm-mm.
So, okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your expertise. The book is The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline. It's a fact-packed history of vaccines and their makers, Shaz Khan. And this is put out by Skyhorse Books, as well as the Children's Health Defense. That's Robert Kennedy's organization. And thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Victoria.
Yeah, appreciate very much your coming on at this, I'm sure, very odd hour in Switzerland today. So I appreciate you doing that. I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's awesome that she could be here. Yeah, I know. It's like, is it 9 or 10 hours ahead? So it's kind of late. So just a little background. Tell you a little bit about what's going on. Her different viewpoint. We'll be talking about this in the future. One of my kids has worked for an autism society, and she's a lot more conversant on some of these things than I. But she did talk about the fact that there's just been a debunking of the connection between vaccines and autism. So there's that, and of course there's the esteem in which RFK Jr. is held in that community. They don't necessarily believe it. Some people do, some others don't. So there's still controversy. But my point here is, wouldn't you prefer to know and be able to act and have that broadly communicated to people than not? That's what I'm thinking. So that would be my advice to you. Just find out. Now, a lot of parents who have kids with autism, they're looking for answers. And those are the parents who went to RFK Jr. and said, well, yeah, and we know that you're just a guy who talks about environmental things, but we think this might be connected to the environmental things. And so he said, well, I'll look into it. And he did. And he wrote a book about it. And he wrote a book about Anthony Fauci. And that book, I'm telling you, if you read RFK's book on Anthony Fauci, I've told my kids this, and I've told other people, if you don't walk away from that book thinking that Anthony Fauci should be in prison, then you didn't read the book. I mean, and it's not because of COVID. It's because of what he did with AIDS and how he killed so many AIDS patients with, it's just, obviously he didn't intend to, but when you keep going with a drug, AZT, that continued to kill the patients you were supposed to help, allegedly, then probably not a good thing. So that's one of the reasons why he just held him in disrepute. RFK held Fauci in disrepute. So that was the name of that book as well. So very, very interesting. Man, so much to talk about and so little time. We're in the embers of our conversation right now. And we'll be back on Thursday. We're going to talk about the magic bullet on Thursday. And we'll talk about other things that are making the news. In addition, more information that we'll have for you on the YouTube letter sent to the congressional representatives who are on the judicial as well as the oversight committee, talking about the fact that they will now allow freer speech on their platform. Well, this remains to be seen. We'll see. Thank you so much for joining the Adult in the Room podcast today with Victoria Taft, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. We do not take you for granted. We appreciate every single person who tunes in every week to listen and watch this program. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday, live streaming on Rumble, and then on every other podcast platform shortly thereafter when we can port it over and get it over there as soon as we can. All the shows can be found at victoriataft.com, where the censorship regime has been banned by me. Follow me on social media at these names: Victoria Taft, the Adult in the Room podcast, and The Victoria Taft Show. Send media inquiries, or any others for that matter, to victoria@victoriataft.com. And here's a big ask. Would you please subscribe, share, like, comment recommend, and give this program a 5-star rating where you can. We really appreciate it. We do not take that for granted either. Follow my work at, you guessed it, victoriataft.com. PJ Media, I write tons over there. Flamingo Audiobooks, and of course the radio. I don't do this alone. This show is produced and engineered by Overall Media. 1A Cast is responsible for some of the Adult in the Room podcast's imaging. Logo design by Hageman Creative. The Adult in the Room podcast is produced at Flamingo Road Studios. All rights reserved.